Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, the show that looks at all aspects of the paranormal and anomalous world. I'm Marcus Lowth, and joining me as he does every week is Steve Mera. Now, Steve, this week we're going to be delving back into the UFO world, looking at some things that we've not actually looked at in any detail on the Anomaly Project. So, should be really good tonight. I'm looking forward to it. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, first one back after the New Year, after Christmas, of course. Which was it's been a cold one. But always enjoying the subject. Of course, it's an immense subject, UFOs, or if you want to call it UAP, which is new terminology. I like UFO. I like that ring. I don't know about UAP, to be honest with you. But first came across UAP in sort of meteorological studies years ago. I mean, it's kind of a but I kind of understand where they're going. But for me, this subject is just a never-ending story. Just keeps going on, and there's so many different things. But exciting times for sure in this subject. So big things are happening.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and
Look for it.
2026 could be a very big year. So, I mean, tonight we're going to be speaking with UFO researcher, writer, and author Preston Dennett. So, first of all, Preston, thanks ever so much for joining us. How are you doing, first of all, my friend?
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. I'm doing pretty good. Hope you guys are too.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. All good. All right, so we've got loads to delve into here, Preston. So, I think the best thing to start with is what dragged you into wanting to really delve into UFOs in particular? Because I know that, I think if I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Japanese Airlines encounter in 1986 was like something of a turning point for you. So could you tell us what dragged you in and just tell us a little bit about your journey into all this, really?
Well, I'll start by saying, yeah, I much prefer the term UFO as opposed to UAP because,
Absolutely.
people call me a ufologist. I don't want to be called a UApologist. Doesn't work.
Does it have the same ring? Does
Not
it?
at all.
No. No, but yeah, I was very skeptical of UFOs growing up, certainly. In 1986, there was that sighting over Alaska by Captain Kenju Torochi, which got on the evening news. That almost never happened back then. So that was quite shocking to me. I happened to be pretty young at that time. I was 21 years old. So perhaps I was a little bit open-minded, but no, not really. I was sure the stars were too far away for ETs to be visiting us. I was very into astronomy and the sciences. So hearing that on the news was a shock. And I thought, well, this poor pilot, I don't think he's lying. He must be deluded. He must be misperceiving. I'm
Yeah.
just kind of going down the list of how could he possibly think this? But it sparked a memory for me because when I was about 13 years old, my older brother Mark, I had three older brothers, came running into the house so excited. He said he'd seen a UFO. Uh, all I really remember him saying was it was very low, it was at treetop level, and he was sure it was something unusual. And I just kind of dismissed it. I didn't believe him. But hearing this report on the news years later, I went back to my brother Mark and asked him about it. And he knocked my socks off. He described a very close-up sighting of a metallic disc, had colored lights around it, obviously metallic, yeah. Uh, about the height of a telephone pole, he said. And he chased it in his car down Reseda Boulevard, not far from where we lived in Southern California, outside of LA. So he's telling me this, and I am just kind of shaking my head in wonder because this is a man I love, trust, know very well. He's not lying to me. He's very intelligent. So I was trying to wrap my head around this, and I'm looking at him, and he can see I'm, really puzzled. So he's like, if you don't believe me, you should ask my friends, Phil and Greg, who are there. You know them, which of course I did. And so I did. I pulled them up. And they not only confirmed his story, but added a few more details. That's what opened the door for me. And what a shock to find out that I had a number of people in my family, friends, and coworkers
Yeah.
who had really dramatic encounters. I mean, face-to-face encounters with grays, missing time, being chased by UFOs, really intense sightings.
That's
So
strange.
I joined MUFON a year later, became a field investigator, dove into just investigating for 10 years, writing articles, appearing on the radio, occasionally on TV. In 1996, 10 years into this, I put out my first book, UFO Healings, and just haven't looked back since then.
Oh,
Yeah,
how many books?
absolutely.
How
I
many
mean,
books in? How many books are you in now?
oh, you're at
Must be.
25 or
Is it about
30, I think,
30?
isn't it? Yeah. I mean, you
Yes.
mentioned UFO healings, Preston. You've kind of led me into this because you speak a lot about a spiritual aspect to UFO sightings and encounters. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because we've touched on this a little bit before, but I mean, I think it means something different to everybody. So what can you speak to me about that? The spiritual side of this and what your research has told you about that.
Yeah, there's a very strong spiritual component to all of this, which in the beginning, a lot of researchers didn't focus on, kind of understandably, because there
Mm,
was this nuts and bolts aspect to this that I think people were really focusing on just proving that this was real,
yeah.
which I understand, but I think it's a mistake, honestly, because to censor out information, evidence is never a good idea.
No.
Doesn't help solve any mysteries. And almost always, when I talk to contactees, there is this aspect. Almost all contactees, and that's what I've really focused my research on. People have been taken on board or seen ETs face to face. Almost all of them describe a wide variety of paranormal events.
Mm,
So we see people saying, I've had ghost encounters, near-death experiences, astral projection,
mm,
precognition, clairvoyance, healing, hands-on healing, this sort of thing. Very common. It's more the rule than the exception.
yeah.
And when people are taken on board, absolutely everyone's talking in telepathy. This seems to sort of spark their own abilities. So
Mm.
there's a connection there.
Mm.
Absolutely, which was took me years and years to unpack, really. Uh,
Yes, a
and I
lot of
think there's,
people. Well, he's still unpacking it. To be honest.
yeah, there's quite a
Did,
bit of confusion about this connection.
yeah.
Uh,
Did your brother see this UFO during the day or the night? Was it during the day?
um, it was at night.
It
Yeah,
was that night. Of course, you said you had lights on it. You see, and I've always been puzzled about, why did he put beautiful bright lights on them for people to see? Because I think they want to. It's like they want to be seen, want to draw the eye, and at the same time, it doesn't seem like the phenomena wants to disclose, does it, Preston? It doesn't seem to want to do that.
yeah. There's a little bit of a push-pull, isn't there?
Mm,
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
interesting because I agree. Why the beautiful colored lights lit up like a Christmas tree?
yeah.
And I think you're right. There are a lot of cases where they are intentionally showing themselves.
Mm,
And I think in some cases, these lights are used for communication, much in the way we have ambulances and police cars and this sort of thing. It's
Yeah.
sending a message. UFOs are normally evasive. You can't just go
yeah,
out and see one any
yeah.
given
It's true.
day.
Mm,
Yeah, I
But,
mean, the lights thing's interesting because there's loads of encounters on record of actual literal communication. People have flashed lights and they flash back.
right?
So there are those sort of things on record. I mean, I suppose I should kind of say this kind of question to the end, but we might as well get to it now because there's loads of things we can come off of this. But what do you think these are, Preston? Are we talking about aliens from another world? Are we talking about interdimensional? Is it something in our consciousness, our collective consciousness, or is it all of those things mixed up? I mean, what's your research tell you about
So glad you asked that.
that?
But I would just circle back a bit to that other question. I think UFOs do put on displays intentionally, and
Right.
this is a term that UFO researchers have long put on. They do want to be seen. I do think we're dealing with ETs,
Okay.
and I think there's a number of really good reasons to reach this conclusion. Uh, if you talk to the contactees themselves, and there are a lot of them, this is the number one explanation that they favor. And this is absolutely true for researchers who focus on onboard encounters. They also have come to that conclusion. I would point to John Mack,
Yeah.
David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins, Timothy Good,
Timothy Good.
uh, Edith Fiore, Barbara Lamb, Yvonne Smith, uh,
hmm
Kathleen Marden.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here. Uh, are they interdimensional? That is another theory. Well, of course they are. We are interdimensional. All entities have an interdimensional aspect. We have a soul. We do survive death. I think
Hmm.
the evidence on that is
Yeah,
really
I agree.
compelling.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how useful it is to call them interdimensional,
Mm.
but they certainly have an understanding of it because apparently that's how they travel interstellar distances. And I say that not speculatively,
Mhm.
but from direct information from the contactees who've been told this.
Right.
So are they
Yeah, it's
time
maybe
travelers?
both. Yeah, it could be both, Preston. It's
Yeah,
interdimensional extraterrestrials. You know,
one
it's
doesn't
just
preclude the other. I
No, not
don't
at
think they're
all.
time travelers.
Like you say, if they were going to traverse space, it would make sense that they would use things such as wormholes, gateways, interdimensional kind of
well,
doorways, and things
yeah,
of that nature.
They're
But,
they're not going to put along at the speed of light, which would take years
oh, of
just to get.
course.
course,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
think if they are as intelligent as we suggest, I think a civilization, advanced civilization, may have found a better way of traversing. You know,
Yeah, that's what the
Well,
evidence is showing us.
traveling.
there's
Yeah,
lots of people that say that they're already here, and this leads me again into I think you've done a lot of research on this. Like underwater bases, for example. I know that you're focusing on Santa Catalina Channel, off the coast of California. There's several hot spots in the waters around the United Kingdom, off of Cornwall, off of Wales, the North Sea. Do you think there's any credence to this? That these extraterrestrials might actually have bases already established here, and they could have been here for thousands of years. And is that why we've got more UFO sightings than not over or near water? Are they using this for bases to traverse the planet? And does that kind of conquer the actual traveling through space aspect of all this?
That was initially something I was leaning towards. But after really looking at it objectively and talking to contactees about this, who have asked about this,
Hmm.
I'm not so sure they have bases here
Right.
because
Okay.
they really don't need them. And let's face it, the world's population is clustered around waterways, whether it's shores or rivers or
Hmm.
lakes. That's where you'll find most people. So it makes sense that that's where we would see a lot of sightings. They definitely do go into the water. There's no doubt about that. In terms of USOs, unidentified submersible objects, there's a
yeah,
huge number of cases. This hasn't gotten a lot of attention until recently.
Hmm.
And for some reason, the Santa Catalina Channel, where I was based there, but
Right.
every researcher in that area, Ann Druffel and Barbara Lamb, Yvonne Smith and Bill Hamilton and Robert Stanley, and I could go on, all have cases there. So I really started diving deep into that and ended up collecting a huge number. So I started like wondering what's going on in this
yeah,
particular area. And I'm still not fully sure, but having talking to contactees, what I'm understanding is that the UFOs come in very hot. People see these anomalous lights at night. Those are not lights, those are craft, but
Yeah.
they're blazing with this sort of plasmic field surrounding them, and they're coming down and they go into the water to cool off.
Okay.
And if you really study the USO cases, you'll see the truth of
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Uh,
Fascinating
and
stuff. Yeah.
There's
I
been
just want to
people.
I want to circle
There's
back
been
a little bit
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Of course.
sorry.
too, because as far as ETs, there's another popular explanation that they're demonic.
Right.
If I've got rows and rows of books behind me and studied demonology. No, they're not demonic. It's a completely separate phenomena,
Okay.
and I don't think the evidence supports it. And I don't think, the Jacques Vallée theory is correct either, that
Okay.
it's an intelligence that wears different masks, which is the second most popular theory by far.
Hmm.
Many intelligent researchers backing it up, but I think they're conflating different phenomena. Fairies, little folk, gnomes and elves are real, and they go back throughout history and all cultures pretty much. I don't think they're ETs. I think they're crypto-terrestrials, interdimensional beings, as we would think of it.
Right.
Yeah,
And Bigfoot and ghosts and all that are, I think, taken at face value, truly what they appear to be. My opinion, based on my research, but yeah, I just wanted to circle back there because that's such a popular theory.
yeah.
And
It's certainly out there. There's lots of different
Definitely.
theories people have. It is interesting that there's been various different people doing different things. When you talk about USOs, it has gone back a long time. When we first heard about 1947 Roswell, it was the Contiki expedition in the same year of 1947. Their
Right.
dialogues talk of very large objects coming out from the ocean, which they watched and observed, spinning as well, and they noted it in the diary logs. Same year as Roswell. So I think that this phenomenon is just as much associated with the water as it has been
Yeah.
with the sky,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Christopher Columbus, apparently, that expedition had an
Yeah,
encounter.
that's
And if you
right.
look at this subject, it definitely goes back to prehistory, since we started writing at all, because there's stone carvings.
Oh
The ancient
yes.
writing of India, Vimanas, uh, Egyptian hieroglyphs are very provocative. But really, the Romans saw them as well. They called them flying shields.
Yes, they did.
Mm,
Uh,
Yeah, and the Romans were
so,
meticulous record keepers, weren't they? So you can, of all the civilizations, you can really put a lot of trust in what the Romans were saying because they were fact checking stuff before they committed it to, to their libraries, if you like. So, what do you think, Preston? And if we're accepting that these intelligences have been here for thousands of years, are we speaking of the same intelligence way back then that are still here today as a civilization, or have we got different extraterrestrials coming in? Because I know some people have said, I forget the guy's name, Hellier, the Canadian former Canadian Defence Minister, has said
I,
he was saying about a dozen, anywhere from 4 to 12, I think he said. What are your views on that? Are we dealing with one civilization or many?
that's a trick question. And this was another thing that really puzzled me. Actually kept me out of the field because I'm like, oh, this sounds like Star Trek to me.
Right.
All
yeah,
these different human
doesn't it?
beings. Um,
Bipedals. Yeah.
but we're kind of stuck with the humanoid form because that's what people are reporting. So it'd be wholly unscientific to just dismiss them because they look like us.
Yeah.
But they do. They absolutely look like us. And the variety is astounding. Yes, we have a lot of grays, reports of grays. Over 50% of my own cases are grays,
Mm.
but absolute human looking, praying mantis, tall whites, little blue beings. It's so hard to categorize. So I really dove deep into this, and occasionally I get the great privilege of talking to a contactee who's had very extensive experiences. One of my favorite is Dolly Saffron. I wrote a whole book about her,
Right.
Symmetry,
Hmm.
because she's what I would call a fully conscious contactee. No
Yeah.
hypnosis, no fear, just interactions. And it's only been a handful of people that have really moved to that level. And she asked them directly about this. And they told her, and I've heard this from others. In fact, it's a very common message. They'll say something like, the ETs will say, we are you, you are us, we are one, we
Right. Yeah.
share a common heritage.
Mm.
So, what we're looking at is that all ETs have genetics, all life has genetics, and are all what we would call human. On this planet, we are not different races. We
Mm.
are all human. We look very different, very, very
Oh yeah.
different.
Yeah. Mm,
And
we
we
do.
see this with ETs. It's ancestry is what we're looking at. They live much longer, so I imagine some of them
Mm.
from Egyptian times are coming back here still, because there are reports of some of them living, you know, well, maybe not Egyptian times, but 1,000 years or
Yeah.
hundreds of years. So I'm thinking we're dealing with, yeah, many different people, but they're so telepathic, they're so advanced, they're absolutely aware of what each other is doing. So it's yeah, what EP society is like, that's still a very open question, I think. We know they don't have governments, a federalized
Mm.
system, money,
Mm.
jails, or anything like this. I've got no evidence of that.
No,
Uh, but
and it
absolutely,
also
there's different civilizations.
looks like Preston that a lot of the greys are like worker drones in the sense of speaking. So
100%.
so who do they answer to? And that's the I think ultimate question is, or
Yeah,
is it just I don't know soldiers in a sense of speaking that they can all utilize
I
for
think so. Actually, the first time I heard about that was from Whitley Strieber.
Yes.
Said,
yeah
some of these are like little androids. They turned them off, they stacked them up like cordwood. He saw them stacked up.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, that's interesting because I've been talking to a lot of contactees where I say, these 3 foot tall little guys don't have any emotions. They're walking in lockstep. They're they feel like, robots almost.
yeah
And yes, I think that that's
mm,
what they are. Not all grays are certainly what I would call, biological androids, but these short little guys, there's a variation of this that are 100% not living beings as we would think of it.
Yeah, I mean,
and can be turned off.
the biological robotics is interesting, like you say, because you tend to have the shorter greys, which do seem to be out of that hive mentality. Then you have taller greys, which seem to be a bit more free thinking. What are your thoughts, Preston? And again, this is, it's a controversial aspect of the UFO and alien mysteries, but I've had a few researchers put forward that these greys are subservient to so-called reptilian entities, and there's obviously encounters and details of reptilian entities going back thousands of years as well, all the way back to the age of civilization. So, do you think there's any credence in that? And just off the back of that, and I don't want to drift too much into ancient aliens territory, but do you think there's any credence to the notion that the gods of the ancient world, are not so much legendary that they could be connected to these extraterrestrials, or is that just like a mismemory from humanity?
Yeah, well, I'll answer that second question first.
Okay.
I think, yes, that ETs have been visiting us for a very long time and we're perceived that way. And if you look at, some, even in the Bible,
Yeah.
uh, people are talking about angels. Well, sometimes they'll say the same darn things the ETs say. Have no fear, we won't hurt you. It's remarkable, the similarities, that really,
Mm.
the commonalities.
Very
I
true.
think they were interpreted that way often. And perhaps there was open official contact at one time, particularly in Egyptian times,
Yeah.
because it seems to be that. As far
Mm.
as reptilians, that one has always been a bit of a head scratcher for me.
Mm,
I don't get many reptilian reports. I've gotten a few. The ones I've gotten were people out in the wilderness hiking around, and there's no UFO around.
right.
And if you look at reptilian reports, I'm leaning towards this explanation that they're crypto-terrestrials living here on our planet and have been for a very long time. There are reports of them on board UFOs, but there are reports of Bigfoot UFOs as
Exactly.
well.
That's true. It's just as
So,
much as Bigfoot ones as there is reptilian ones,
so
isn't
I,
it?
I do think the reptilians are real. I think they're intelligent. I think that there's a bell curve of how they're perceived. I don't like to speculate. So I just kind of lean on firsthand reports because some people I've talked to directly have had very benevolent encounters with them,
Mm,
and others are like, not so much.
yeah.
So I, yeah, it's that one's hard for me to unpack.
Mm.
I'd like to do a whole deep dive on that because the disinformation in this field
Yeah.
is,
Oh, it's
Yeah.
it's vast. It's very
oh,
confusing.
Certainly
You
around the
know,
reptilians, it is.
it
I mean,
really
there's all
is.
sorts of swirls and
Yeah.
conspiracies about the reptilians. I mean, you mentioned there about there being a crypto, like a cryptid creature, possibly from another world, another dimension. And Steve mentioned about Bigfoot sightings, and there's loads of Bigfoot. So you get a lot of Bigfoot reports in UFO hotspots, for example. And what do you think the connection is there? Because some people say there's a direct connection, and these Bigfoot are working for or with the extraterrestrials, and then maybe extraterrestrial in nature themselves. Well, other people will say, well, it's more the location. Perhaps that there is some kind of portal or gateway there that somehow lets these UFOs through, but also allows Bigfoot and other creatures to come through. So, have you got any thoughts on that? What's your research told you on things of that nature? These connections between different fields of interest, really.
yeah. Bigfoot was the subject I avoided. I thought it was going to be a can of worms. What if it's real? This is going to be another whole wormhole, a rabbit
Yeah.
hole,
Yeah.
rather.
Yeah.
And of course, you have to follow the evidence where it leads you. And I got my first Bigfoot UFO case from a man in Canyon country who had a UFO land in his backyard, and a Bigfoot showed up the next day. And so I became a Bigfoot researcher, wrote a book on it, ended up talking to a lot of people. Bigfoot is real.
Mm-hmm.
That much I think we can absolutely establish. It's all over the world, going back centuries. The
Mm.
evidence is outstanding, very much like
Yes.
UFOs.
Yeah.
Uh, there's this scattering of reports, and it's almost statistically insignificant when you think about, there's a million Bigfoot reports and a million documented encounters. But there's 50, 100, 200 cases where Bigfoot and UFOs intersect exactly. I mean, people have seen a UFO and Bigfoot comes out of it or goes into it or is there at the same time. So what is going on here?
Mm.
People are like, well, is Bigfoot an alien? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's been around too long. It's all over the world. We've pretty much established that Bigfoot lives in areas where there's a water source and a food source. They favor high mountain valleys and ridges, rivers. They're living on this planet. And here's my latest theory. And you might laugh, but I think this is actually, I mean, this is my assessment, right?
Okay.
I think some Bigfoot, and I think they're intelligent largely, and probably to some degree interdimensional because they seem to be able to disappear and there's a
Mm.
telepathic thing
Yeah.
going on and there's this whole paranormal aspect. I think
Absolutely.
some Bigfoot are UFO contactees, much in the same way a person is. I mean, why not? UFOs, ETs contact all different kinds of people. They're collecting all different kinds of life forms, animals, plants, soil samples. They are studying our planet. There's no doubt about this. So it fits in. It makes perfect sense that they would contact other species, Bigfoot,
Mm.
particularly if they're intelligent, which I think
Yeah.
they are. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think some of these Bigfoot are contactees.
Yeah.
Oh, I
In
kind
fact,
of,
it does seem to go through cycles. I mean, we did have cycles of small humanoid beings. Of course, we had the Space Brothers, of course, and the era of contactees regarding that, but they seem to be pretty rare now. I don't seem to get many Space Brothers. Where's the Space Brothers gone? They just decided not to bother coming anymore. You still get the odd reports, though, of people saying that it's all humanoids. But some of them have actually, some people have said that they were human. They believed they were human, some of these people. I mean, not like Travis Walton, where they clearly look to be Palladian or something. But if you just take, for instance, the Pascagoula UFO incident, the guys there, it's not often talked about actually. But I thought it was quite interesting that they went crab fishing, and then the beings that came out the ship had crab hands. I just thought that's a bit strange. But they said they saw human beings on the ship behind a glass screen.
Mhm.
Now we're rather working with them, or they generate a perception of humans being there to maybe settle you down a little bit. What are your thoughts on that, Preston?
yeah, it's interesting. I know our beliefs play a powerful role in how we perceive
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
I've seen this when I interview people who are perhaps profoundly religious or diehard atheists, even,
True. Yeah.
or fear-based or what have you. I do think the contactee era is very interesting because we did see these absolutely friendly, human-looking ETs. George Adamski is somewhat, I think, partly a hoaxer, though I'm
Mhm.
not
Mm.
sure entirely because
Not
he had,
entirely, but it does seem to be a lot of people that back him up,
Well,
which
the
are
yeah,
pretty
Adamski thing,
credible.
the
Yeah.
Adamski thing's interesting because the most sound theory I've heard about that, and I wonder what you both think about this, is that his initial contact experiences were genuine, and then he kind of
100%.
just sailed and just kind of
Very
add in
possible.
detail and
Yeah,
exaggerate
he
stuff. So I
he
mean,
had outside witnesses who saw him actually, and they never retracted their story.
mm,
And Daniel Fry, I think his story is
yeah, yeah,
legitimate. He's a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
Truman Bethlehem, there,
Yeah.
Howard Menger. There's a lot of these
Yeah.
early
George
contactees,
Hunt Williamson as well, and
right?
yeah,
Who I think their stories, I think probably are more legitimate. Some of them, some not clearly.
yeah.
But then we have the Greys coming in full force, and I don't think the contactee era ever stopped. I think it got pushed underground.
Mm,
Because I have to tell you, while I do get a lot of gray
mm,
reports, human looking is a close second.
oh yeah, yeah,
But fear sells. There's a fear-based narrative being put forth by our governments who, are covering the subject up. That's not speculation. We know
oh
this.
yeah.
oh
It's
yeah, of course,
demonstrably provable.
yeah,
They're pushing a fear-based narrative. So I think that there was a very carefully orchestrated,
I totally
heavily
agree.
funded
Yeah,
campaign to sort of
yeah.
bury these friendly accounts.
It's interesting when you look at all the UAP hearings and these, which have recently been taking place over the last sort of 12 months, and some to come. They don't talk about experiences. They don't talk about people that have these encounters. It
Right?
simply is UFOs or secret programs or crashed UFOs or metamaterials, and that's about it. I
Yeah,
mean,
which speaks volumes, doesn't
doesn't it?
it?
Really does, doesn't it?
Mm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Preston,
Like,
can I just
why
pick up
not?
on something you said there, Preston, about you think that the humanoid encounters are more like, for want of a better phrase, the tall blonde humanoid is what we're speaking about, essentially. And like you say, there are story reports. I mean, there was one that actually made the news, I think, in Peru. about 2 or 3 years ago now. A guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but it made the news. And he said he'd been approached by a tall blonde humanoid entity while he was fighting forest fires in the Amazon. And he was wounded, he said. What I want to get your thoughts on, though, off the back of like you're saying, this has been pushed underground. I know this is a bit outlandish, so you might just want to dismiss this anyway. But the alleged Eisenhower deal that was apparently made in the 50s, 54, I think it was, in a hangar in California, when he said he was having emergency dental work. Some researchers have said, and they've not necessarily put documentation to back this up, but they said there was 2 meetings that night, one with these tall humanoids and one with representatives of the Greys. And the tall humanoids were willing to give technology, but they wanted essentially humanity to go to more, cleaner fuels, cleaner ways of living, etc., and obviously no weaponization. The Greys didn't really care what we did with it. They just said, we'll give you the technology, but we want access to the population. And obviously 6-7 years after that, alien abductions kind of started happening in earnest. Is there any credibility to that, in your opinion, Preston? And is that why we're kind of seeing a pushing away of the humanoid encounters?
Yeah. Well, I did a deep dive on that. I wrote UFOs over California, and Edwards Air Force Base is a UFO magnet from day one. And the Edwards Air Force Base meeting of 1954 did happen, in my opinion. There was leaks of information from day one. Brinsley-Lepore Trench was one of them. A number of every researcher pretty much who's looked into it is impressed that something happened there. I do think there was a meeting. I do think Eisenhower was there as heads of military, religion, politics, business. A bunch of people were there who were very influential in our society. And from what I understand and what I've been able to really parse out is that, yes, UFOs did land. Eisenhower was taken on board. There was a direct negotiation with, I believe it was the human-looking tall whites, something along those lines, where they requested that we stop using nuclear weapons and power, that it was a pathway towards self-destruction, and we didn't want to do that. They requested we disclose and begin an education campaign. We didn't want to do that either. So there was something of an impasse. I absolutely reject any idea that we were given technology by the ETs.
Right, okay.
And I'm saying that from a contactee angle. We've been told that, no, that did not happen. We would never be given technology by the ETs. They know better than to hand over technology to a society that is so brutally corrupt and weaponizing anything that they can get their hands on. I think that's straight up disinformation, and I tracked it down to, I think it's John Lear was one of the first proponents of this.
He was one of the first, yeah.
So I don't think so.
Of course, there's a lot of talk in more modern times of UFO crash retrievals, and I'm always pondering, why are so many crashing or blowing up in the sky or parts falling off them? That's what really does puzzle me.
We're so advanced, right? It's like, what? How can this happen? Yeah. That's another real head scratcher. And I've thought about this for a long time. And again, came from a contacting angle because I don't like speculating. People are wildly speculating, like, well, maybe they just gave it to us. I'm like, well, maybe, but what's your evidence for that? None. It's pure speculation.
Yeah.
What I think we're dealing with is UFO presence on our planet that throughout the years is far more vigorous and numerous than most people have any idea. Look at NUFORC and MUFON, the National UFO Reporting Center and Mutual UFO Network here in the US, just 2 reporting services out of many all over the world, getting 10, 20 reports a day.
Oh, yeah.
As a UFO researcher, and I think any researcher will back this up, one person in maybe 20, 50 will report it. So you could, easily times that by 10, or probably 100 would be more accurate.
Yeah.
So you're looking at what, 200 reports?
It's a ridiculous amount.
Day?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Every day? So
yeah.
How many UFOs are flying around? A lot. So that might contribute to this.
I agree. I mean, sorry to jump in, Preston, but you're like myself. You compile data. You put across all these accounts. So you know exactly how many sightings there are. when you look at it, when you look at the actual list of these, and it's impossible to list every single sighting. I accept that, but like you say, they're literally happening every day. There's literally a sighting somewhere in the world every day, and that's just what's on record. And as you're saying, I agree with you. Most people won't report this for various reasons.
Yeah.
They just dismiss it, or they'll feel like they'll get ridiculed. So you know, do you feel what's the drive behind this, Preston? Why are there so many UFOs in the sky? What's the agenda? Are they trying to advance humanity, or what are these abductions that take place? Are they for their own ends? Are they studying us for their own ends? What's your thoughts on that? Because there's, like you say, there's definitely sightings still being reported all the time.
Yeah, well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think if you take a look at UFO history throughout the ages, you see some really startling patterns. The first really, I think, significant one being the modern age of UFOs, 1947, which was unprecedented. Never before has anything like this happened, where there's this giant wave across the world in such high numbers. Why? What's going on our planet at that time? Well, we know now it's the atomic age.
Yep.
We
Yeah.
started exploding nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Is there a connection? I'm not the first to say so. I think absolutely, because the number one message from ETs when people are taken on board is that warnings against nuclear proliferation. So if you start looking at major world events and the connection to, major UFO sightings, you start to see this weird pattern
Mm.
of this sort of thing. There was a wave in Farmington, New Mexico, on St. Patrick's Day in, oh gosh, 57 thereabouts.
I think it
Don't
was
quote me, but it's
57. It was
I
definitely in the
think
50s. I know what you're referring to.
St. Patrick's Day. Well, I've had a couple of contactees say, look up what's going on in the world whenever these events are occurring. I did. Californium, an artificial nuclear element, was discovered on that day.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Announced. They announced the discovery on that darn day. Look at the French wave of 1954, which
Yeah.
was unprecedented
Yeah.
before or since. Nothing like that has ever happened. October, November,
Mm.
thousands of sightings, hundreds of humanoid sightings. It's crazy. This was an absolute display. What's going on at that time? CERN. CERN was just established
Right.
in
Okay.
that area.
Yeah.
We had allegedly just reverse engineered, anti-gravity, this sort of thing. So I
Wow.
Mm.
started to see these connections here. So I think that's what we're looking at. When 1954, and we refused to disclose, well, ET said, okay, we'll do it, and started a very vigorous grassroots movement um, with these waves of sightings every 5 or 10 years over some area, whether it's 1991, Mexico City,
Yes.
during the solar eclipse.
Mm.
Marcus, I follow your work, Marcus, by the way, because
Thank you.
you write a lot of stuff about these kinds of things, and it's amazing to see.
Thank you.
You were one of the ones who kind of clicked me onto the schoolyard UFO encounters.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
this is a
Right.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Oh,
ended up writing a whole book on that.
oh,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah.
that's another example of them doing their vigorous publicity campaign. I
Yeah.
think that's one of their main goals, is just to simply announce their presence to all humanity. But if I may, real quick, when people are taken on board, they're given 5 messages, 5 areas of information: nuclear proliferation, warnings against war and aggression, warnings against greed and corruption, warnings against destruction of the environment, and pollution. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. That's why people are being taken on board. Physically examined, this is when they're healed. It's a very scary experience for people, and they often interpret it as negative, especially in the beginning. But
Mm.
the vast majority of contactees I've spoken with, and I use that term as opposed to abductees, because I got
Yes.
in trouble with people. They don't like it. They're
Yeah.
like, no, actually, this was a good experience for me. A mixed bag, for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, people are being healed, and every major researcher, almost without exception, has healing cases, including
Yeah.
David Jacobs, who doesn't really like the ETs,
No,
but
no,
John
it's
Mack,
true. There
Bud
are
Hopkins,
those. Yeah.
Edith Fiord, Tim Good, Ray Hernandez,
Mm.
Barbara
Mm.
Lamb, Yvonne Smith. They all have them. Brad Steiger, RD6 Killer Clark. I love her work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we need to just step
Mm.
back and take an objective look at the sequence of events that takes place
Yeah,
when people are taken on board.
I think it's healthy to just put everything out on the table and let people try and decide what they want to decide, because I think the problem is that we might be just misinterpreting just agenda. There is no bad, there is no good. There's just people with different jobs.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, we all have multiple agendas, every single one of us.
Mhm.
Some people are more focused than others, perhaps, but we all need to make money. We want to raise a family. We want to improve our skills, become a musician,
Yeah.
Yeah,
sports, whatever.
yeah,
I think the
Well,
true.
ETs are the same way, multiple agendas.
Mm.
yeah, I think a good example of that, like Steve says there about different agendas, and I don't know if you've heard of the Alfred Bertu case. It was over
I
here in the
have,
United
yeah.
Kingdom, and they essentially took him on board. It wasn't an abduction, as you say. He was led on board. It was all peaceful, but they ended up turning around and saying essentially something like, you're no use to our purposes, whether it's because of his age. They didn't go into that, but so that kind of makes me think, well, maybe that agenda was to study humanity, and they couldn't do that in this specimen, for want of a better phrase. So, I mean, do you feel there's an end game in sight to this? Then that whatever agendas are out there, that we're going to, because if you look at the world now and the state of the world right now, I mean, it's a pretty scary place, and we're kind of closer to now to where we thought we would be back in the 40s and 50s than ever before. Where everything's going. Do you think we'll see some kind of end game or intervention? I'm not saying they're going to turn up on the White House lawn, but do you feel we'll see more sightings, more attempts to get themselves into the human psyche?
They almost did end up on the White House lawn in 1952, didn't they?
We
Yeah,
did, not
What did we
far off.
do? We chased after them.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm not so sure I would call it, use that terminology as an end game, because this appears to be an ongoing thing.
yeah.
I think ET stepped in when they realized, well, these people are in trouble. They're on a road pathway to self-destruction.
Mhm.
Uh, and again, talking to the contactees, people have asked them, why don't you just disclose? And they said, well, we have. I've got this from multiple cases. Look at the Kumburgaz turkey footage.
Yeah,
It
true.
came down, and hands down, that's the
Yeah,
best footage out there.
yes.
Uh, that was, vigorously covered up by our governments, who couldn't actually do it because it's still got legs. It's People are still looking at it. I don't know that, disclosure is inevitable, obviously, because it's true. You can't hide the truth. Like Buddha said, three things you can't hide: the sun, the moon, and the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
true.
gonna come out sooner or later.
Mm.
I think the main barrier towards open official contact, and ETs have said this flat out to people, is our own warlike ways, our aggression, our fear of people who look a little different. We're killing each other. We're committing mass genocide. We are not grown up. We are spiritually backwards. We need to grow up before we have any chance of contact. And I think the ETs are really warning us that we're in for a rough ride, because the messages people are getting is that, yeah, at some point, and most contactees who have any real depth to their case, other than, no, I was taken on board, I had missing time, I remember being physically examined, that's it. No, I'm
Mm.
talking about people who've had some
Yeah.
conversation. Well, at some point, get the message, or be told, or dream, or even, or the sky filling with craft and people being pulled on board. I think there is a possibility that we're facing well, not a possibility. I think that probably this is what's going on. We're facing an existential crisis.
Oh,
And
yes.
if
Yeah.
you look into the science of this, I would encourage people to look up CMEs, coronal mass ejections, look up
Okay.
the weakening of our magnetic field on our planet,
Mm.
look up polar tilts and all of this.
It's
That's
all
a
happening.
very
Yeah.
common
Yeah.
message.
Well,
So it looks like that's what we're facing.
it's a bit strange, and I don't know if you notice certain patterns, Preston, but there does seem to be like a waves of, of course, we've got solar activity, planet changing things, a lot of unrest around the world, lots of people talking about World War III approaching, and we're seeing a lot of strange things, and it seems like it's all sort of rolled up into one. And I've noticed when we go through these cycles, we tend to have a lot of UFO interest. I mean, they've always been interested in seemingly just watching us war against each other. They've always tend to have been watching that, but no intervention. So there's clearly like a prime directive, like Star Trek. Then there's
Yeah.
only so much they can do, but they cannot stop because we could have a wonderful world ecologically. I mean, we could have lots of better way of living if it was forced upon us, by a hierarchy taking control. But that doesn't seem to be their way. It seems like we've got to find our own way. And I think
Yeah, I agree.
it.
I mean, I personally would welcome the alien overlords. I think they do a much better job than
Yeah.
our leaders.
Certainly right now.
But
Yeah.
Yeah.
no, that people have asked this directly. Why don't you just come and help us? I've got a case in Austria, a case I personally investigated in Sedona. Many, many cases that support this scenario where people have asked directly, can't you just come in and help us? And they said, no, we cannot do that. It's a violation of autonomy. It is up to you to solve your own problems. We can provide information. We can help those who are helping others. We can intervene to a limited extent, but it is up to you. And every parent knows this. You can't do everything for your child. You can't tie
No.
their shoes.
Yeah.
They have to learn how, they didn't prevent Hiroshima or Nagasaki, did they?
No.
No.
Because if they had done that, we would not have learned the error of our ways. It's
Yeah.
up to us. I don't think they're going to save us, no. But look at the Malmstrom incident. I think this is a
Mhm.
perfect example of the
Mhm.
extent that they will intervene. For
Mm.
those who don't know of it, look it up. 1967, UFOs came down over Malmstrom Air Base and shut down our intercontinental ballistic missiles. They didn't remove them, they didn't destroy them.
No.
They just put them offline in a way that was absolutely undeniable because you can't shut 20 of these things down. They're
Yeah.
completely separate systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a slap on the wrist. The poor military folks must have been so alarmed. From a military perspective, you can see how that would be like, oh my God, what are we dealing with here?
Yes.
Mm.
But no, that's clearly, I think, just a
Yeah. Of
very
course.
strong message. Stop.
Yeah.
Stop what you're doing. Are you
And we
crazy?
also have the Vandenberg incident, didn't we?
Mhm.
Where it was a dummy warhead, but it seemingly that our good friends didn't maybe not have known that was a dummy warhead, but they took it out.
If they knew.
All traveling at 14,000 miles an hour, I believe.
It's almost like a demonstration of the power, isn't it?
It's
Almost.
just if they can do that, yeah. I mean,
Mm.
that
Yeah.
is incredible, to be
It
honest.
leads me
Thanks
nicely,
thanks to
actually, into
Bob
the next.
Jacobs.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, Jacobs. I want to come to Jacobs later, actually, but I want to get your thoughts on not your thoughts so much, Preston, but some of your research from your contactees. I don't know whether this has come up, but why are they so interested in not interfering but guiding humanity? Well, because generally speaking, rule of thumb is certainly for humanity. Outside of those who just do things out of the kindness of their own heart, there's got to be a carrot. There's got to be something in it for them. So why are they so interested? Is it just that I've heard researchers say that the Earth itself is such a valuable planet in terms of everything that's here, the water, the abundance of life, and they want to protect the planet more than humanity. Uh, what are your thoughts? Have you had any information from your contactees on that nature of things?
Yeah. Initially, it was very clear to me that ETs are interested in all things Earth to an
Mm,
amazing extent, from digging soil, like I mentioned, or
mm,
collecting every animal life. Some people call them the gardeners. What's going on here? Yeah, contactees have asked this question directly. Why are you so interested in us? And the answer is essentially that we share a common ancestry.
okay.
Altruism is a rare thing here on Earth, but I don't know that it's so rare among highly advanced species. They are very connected to us. The fact that some look just like us raises incredible implications about human origins.
Mm.
And what ETs have told people is that no, we did not come from Earth. We did not evolve from apes. That's not correct. At one point, we did live on Mars. This is what contactees have been
Right.
told.
Mm.
Earth experiences regular cycles of extinction events, and people are
Yes.
lifted off and put back. The ETs look upon us as their children. Our relationship to them is far, far closer, I think, than even people within the UFO community imagine. Uh,
Mm.
they keep saying it over and over again. We are you, you are us. We are one. It's that symbol, exact sentence is said over and over again to contactees. I laughed out loud when I was interviewing Dolly Saffron, and she brought that up. She's kept completely out of the UFO community, as many
Mm.
contactees do. They don't want to read UFO books. They
Yeah.
have their own experiences. But they, yeah, are, I think that's what's going on here is they feel very connected to us. And so why wouldn't they? As anyone would, if you see
Mm.
someone trip on the street in front of you, your initial impulse is to run forward and help them out. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Mars there. I mean, so just briefly, I mean, does that maybe then explain and give credence to some of the sightings, the so-called Pyramid of Mars and the Sphinx and the ruins where the people have claimed to have seen hieroglyphs and things of that nature? And, there's this old CIA document which is about a remote viewing mission to Mars 1 million years ago. And they were saying there was literally people fleeing and it made out that they were arriving on Earth before there was any life here at all. Is there any credence to those suggestions and theories that, that there could have once been, like you say, life on Mars, and they mirror it, like say the Egyptian civilization that sprung up thousands of years ago?
That's what Dolly Saffron was told. I interviewed a guy
Right.
in Texas. He was 7 years old. The ETs told him that. His parents were deeply Catholic, and they were quite upset about it. Like when he said, "Oh yeah, we used to live on Mars, mommy." Uh, and that, yeah, that turns up quite a bit. I'm skeptical of some of the, monuments and stuff.
Yeah.
Pareidolia is a real thing. And it's, the face on Mars, I don't know. That's not my area of expertise. I really don't want to go too far with that because
Sure.
that's not where I focus my own research. But just as someone who's kind of scientifically minded and really preferring not to speculate, but just build on the data that we know and can verify, I'm skeptical of a lot of those reports.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, there does seem to be enough data coming in that there was life on Mars at some point.
Yeah.
Some,
Don't we have,
Ellis
you think we
wrote a
have
book.
a cycle which is closer to Mars than
Yeah.
Earth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. 25 hour
Ellis
cycle.
Silver wrote a book called Humans Are Not From Earth. I think that's the title.
Yeah, something like
And
that.
it was
Yeah.
an interesting book because he's like, we're really not all that well adapted to this planet.
Yeah.
No.
We all have lower back pain, which,
Yep.
and we're hairless and we need clothes to survive. Uh, and all these, most of the food needs to be cooked and all these different little details
Mm.
he put forth, which was, you know, I don't
It's
agree completely with
interesting.
all his conclusions, but it really, I thought was
Yeah.
very interesting, his
Yes.
argument. Like maybe he's correct here.
Yeah. No, I
So,
completely agree. The Alice Silver stuff. I mean, like Steve was saying, it's a 25-hour clock, isn't it, Steve?
that's
Basically,
right.
we're more
Yeah.
in sync with Mars
Does
and
seem to be. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, just again, it's a theory that's well out there. So I'm not saying I buy into this. I'd like to get both your views, I guess, but it's called the prison planet theory, essentially. You already mentioned how humans are very warlike. And some researchers have said that, I mean, it could have even been the same guy actually, who was saying that, we could be seen as Earth is the Australia, if you like, of the solar system, where the Brits took all their prisoners to Australia, didn't they,
Yeah.
back in the day, and etc. etc. But do you think that's do you think that is a possibility that we were kind of brought here as like a penal colony, those of the human race or the aliens who were just like more warlike, more aggressive criminals essentially, and just left to kind of whether they took off and left us on purpose or they just died out? Is there any credence to that kind of theory that we are actually like a prison planet essentially?
I don't think so. I don't subscribe to that. I can see why people would perceive that because we are acting like a bunch of criminals, which is really unfortunate. And I think one of the reasons we do have such profound intervention here from ETs. But no, I think ultimately we all choose to come here, reincarnate here over and over again to learn certain lessons we can't learn on the higher planes. Again, I think it's important to approach this from a spiritual angle as well,
Yeah. Sure.
because to not do so would be to miss a big part of the puzzle here.
Yeah.
No, I do think that ETs are concerned. I don't think that they're going to necessarily stop us from space exploration, but would we be allowed to go, start exploding nuclear bombs on other planets? I doubt that.
Yeah.
So then we might get actual intervention and be
Mm.
essentially quarantined. But at this point, no, I don't think there's any evidence that people are being brought here as prisoners
Yeah.
because they're, backward minded. I think if you look at the history of humanity, we're just terrible. We
Mm,
have a
mm.
heinous history of genocide and wars and delusion, and I mean, we're not just not growing up.
Yeah.
I don't know what our
Well, yeah,
problem
it
here is.
doesn't look to be changing anytime soon, Preston.
Yeah, it's gotten
Yeah.
better. I mean, over the past few hundred years, we've had
Mm.
the women's rights movement, the civil rights movement. We're
Yeah.
starting to recognize that we're all people, at least,
Yeah.
of one race, not
Yeah.
we're not
Yeah.
different races, as I mentioned earlier.
Exactly.
We're making
Yeah.
some progress in some areas.
Yeah. I know. I just don't think fast enough, unfortunately.
No,
Yeah,
it does feel like we're sliding back a little bit.
peace on
Yeah.
Earth. That's what we really need to start with.
Well,
Uh,
yeah,
I was
exactly.
just looking into a contactee case where the ETs told this little boy from North Dakota, your biggest problem is the corruption of your governments.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
yeah,
wow, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
yeah.
hard to get
Name
away from
name
that.
one good government, name one government that everyone in the country loved. And
No,
No,
I would
I think you'll be there a long time for sure.
you're not gonna find one. But you've obviously been involved in the subjects now for quite some time. Of course, writing the books, doing the research, investigations. Here's the big question: how does one do all that for so many years and not have experiences themselves? I would assume that by doing this and throwing yourself into this subject, that you could have maybe opened the door to have some experiences yourself. Would I be right by saying that, Preston?
Yeah, you would be.
Hmm?
I knew
Just
that was
something
going to
works
come
like
out
that. Yeah.
because I did start having some sightings, and I looked into this because Ed Conroy began studying Whitley Strieber's case
Mhm.
Mm.
and coined this term UFO investigator's disease.
Right.
Yeah.
So I looked it up because, pretty much a good majority of researchers out there start having experiences. You're associating with contactees
Yeah.
very closely.
Mm.
So it's, I think,
Yeah.
understandable. But it is in my family. My brother had a very close sighting. Didn't mention this. I think it might have been more than a sighting because he had this little implant in his arm,
Oh, right. Okay.
which was shocking. I took him to a doctor, who was a MUFON field investigator, and the doctor, his eyes went wide because you could palpate it,
Well,
right
could
beneath
you?
his
Oh, dear.
arm.
Right.
There's no scar. It disappeared one day. But my
Right.
little sister, Valerie, had, there's six of us kids. Three
Right.
of us have had encounters. I am definitely the one who's had the most because it started circling closer and closer to me.
Mm.
In 1992, I had 4 or 5 sightings, some with telepathic communication.
Yeah.
Ended up one point getting this weird download of information that grays were essentially human. Uh, had, I mean, I kept getting closer and closer sightings.
Mm.
Yeah.
Uh, and over the years, it's added up to the point where I finally, in 2022, had a fully conscious onboard encounter, was taken on board, and it turned out to be the same contacts of the lady I was investigating, Dolly Saffron.
Oh.
Her craft, her main contacts, she calls this tall gray mama. Well, that's who I saw. I have to
Mm.
tell you, it was the most wonderful experience of my life.
Mm.
5 minutes on board this craft, just walking around. It was funny because they laid me out on this table and I'm trying to get up. And
Right.
they're like, no, 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 we need to make sure you're all right. I'm like, I'm fine. I had a missing time incident in 1992 as well. So this goes
Yeah.
way back for me.
Yeah.
Uh,
You
and
are right by saying those. So many people, even latecomers to the subject, and suddenly decide, oh, I'm getting interested. Who may never have experienced anything or seen a UFO, seem to, as soon as they engage with the phenomenon, which is very interesting because it's a bit like statistical sightings across the US have significantly grown in large amounts since the public announcement of UFOs in association to the Pentagon's release of information saying, look, we know they exist, but we don't know what they are. Is that belief maybe just switching one day to, all right, maybe I will accept the fact that UFOs do actually exist, coincides with the rise of people seeing them. So really, it's a bit like believing is seeing rather than seeing is believing. It's kind of the other way around. Mind you, you could understand that. You wouldn't see a religious apparition if you didn't have religion, I suppose. So,
Yeah.
but
Well, there's been a paradigm shift for sure.
Mm.
I
yeah,
think the subject is finally enjoying a resurgence in popularity that it's long deserved.
Yeah.
Uh, and
mm,
I don't trust our government's one iota until and unless they will admit to the Eisenhower meeting or the Malmstrom
Yeah.
or the Capitol flyover
that's all
or
it
any,
takes. Yeah.
Yeah. I
yeah,
think the government
which they don't.
they've put
They
themselves in
denied
such a
Roswell.
hole,
They
haven't they,
denied
really?
Malmstrom.
Yeah, I
They
mean, they've
They
put themselves in such a
designed
hole.
Roswell, yeah, but they couldn't. When we had the UAP hearings, let's not forget when Roswell was mentioned, we had two people in there, and in the Congress say, "What's Roswell?"
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
children in school know what Roswell is.
Yeah. I mean, the
Yeah.
UAP stuff's interesting. I want to come back to the disclosure stuff in a bit when we're keeping an eye on the time. What I want to just quickly get your thoughts on, Preston, because if I understand this correctly, like myself, you've got an interesting astral projection, out of body experiences, and that kind of thing. And again, this is something that you can train yourself to do, or you can be guided to do it. What I'm really interested in is, do you feel there's some kind of connection to the alien abduction phenomena between alien abduction and astral projection and out of body? Because we've spoke to some researchers on this program, and they've kind of said that there's a lot of evidence that alien abductions are in fact out of body, even though people who experience them experience them as if they are physically there. So I mean, when you look at shamans, for example, they go into trances and they kind of perhaps leave their body and they see other entities that we might class as aliens. So if you could speak to me a little bit about astral projection and your experience, and also, do you feel there is a connection to alien abduction, or are these two different things?
Well, I'm gonna just start with I don't use that term again. I call them onboard experiences.
Okay, yeah, apologies.
Just saying. And yes, there's a connection, but I wholly 100% vehemently, and I'll underline that, disagree that this is a mental experience in any way. If
Right,
you look at it very carefully, you will see many multiple witness cases. People being healed of terminal illness, people having implants put in their body, missing pregnancies where they go back and they see the child, they see the baby, the child, the
yeah,
adult,
Mm,
leave landing traces. They're on radar. People are missing from their rooms. I have case after case after case after case of this. This is not a mental experience. This is not an out of body experience. No, no, no. This is physical. People are being physically taken. That said, there is a connection because you will have a hard time finding a UFO contactee who hasn't experienced these paranormal events. And astral projection is high, high on the list. It's really interesting to me that for me, UFO research and astral projection came simultaneously, which I always thought was, kind of a remarkable coincidence. My
mm,
family thought I was nuts. They lost their mind. They thought I'd lost my mind because I'm like, UFOs are real. And Mark believed me, my older brother, and my sisters were okay with it, but my dad never came around. And I'm like,
no.
guess what? I'm going out of body. Like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, listen, try this. You can do this. Don't believe me. Astral projection is a natural human talent. Most people will have one out of body experience in their lifetime. You can absolutely learn how to do this. I learned from Robert Monroe in his books.
Mm,
right.
But yeah, there's a connection there for sure. One of the ET agendas is to basically teach us to access these natural human abilities. They're not supernatural, they're not paranormal, they're normal. It's the way we should be. And astral projection, I love that subject. I could talk on it for hours. It changed my life. It's so much fun.
Mm.
It, I mean, there's so many good things about it. I can't
mm,
I can't
yeah,
say
Completely agree.
enough about it.
yeah.
Completely agree.
But yeah, there's a connection for sure. Real quick, one case, this guy had UFOs come around his plane, freaked him out. He landed. Government folks came, asked him all these questions, and one really puzzled him. They asked him, "So, have you had any out-of-body experiences following your encounter?" He thought that came kind of out of the blue, but yeah, he
Yeah,
had.
yeah.
That's
Right.
one of the first cases I'm like, wow, there is a connection here. Now I always ask that. And yeah, it turns up all the time.
I mean, that's interesting, Steve, isn't it? There, that the government are asking questions about out of body
Well,
experiences. It
that
shows they
means that
know.
yeah, they have a pattern of information. They know, of course. That's
100%.
why you'd ask
They've
questions.
known from the beginning. I did a whole book on drive-in theater encounters.
Right. Okay.
1952, terrorist drive-in, Bakersfield, UFOs come down and they
Mm.
put on a display. People start calling the sheriff's office. Sheriff Leroy Hatfield took 4 calls, finally went down there, interviewed 30 people, sent a report to Edwards Air Force Base, the closest Air Force base. I found the report. It was marked action in
All
red
right.
letters. And this is 1952, mind you.
Mm.
This was sent to the commanding general at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Kind of interesting, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
To the head of intelligence at Washington, D.C., to the head of Air Force Base in Colorado. We track all incoming and outgoing traffic there in the U.S. So that's 1952. At the time, they said anyone who sees a UFO is an idiot. They're all explainable as hoaxes, hallucinations, misperceptions, and mental illness.
Mm.
Liars,
Yeah.
lying from the beginning, still lying. I don't trust them. Their record on this is heinous.
Yeah.
And until they can admit to Roswell and all those other cases, I don't want to hear a thing you have to say until you can
No.
come clean.
Mm.
I don't trust you, and I've got good reason.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm very passionate about this. So,
Oh no, I
No,
mean,
no, no. I would totally understand. There is the obviously two different versions of what's taking place. You've got the government's what they say, and of course the experiences of what they say. These
interview
experiences.
some experiencers. Why are you ignoring them? What's wrong with you?
They
That's
won't
the
even
heart.
talk about them.
Yeah, this is where we get everything we know about UFOs that we can trust comes from one single source, the
Mm.
experiencers.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
absolutely. Just
Not
to
No
many
echo
trust
that,
retrievals.
just
Yeah.
to echo the passion there. I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, I was on a podcast recently, no, let's say a few months ago, and it was an American podcast. So as a Brit, I'm a bit of an outsider, but yeah, I mean, I feel the American government have put themselves in this position over the course of many decades. They've lied, they've covered things up. So I think even if they wanted to admit the truth, I don't think that you said people aren't going to believe them. Sort of literally dragging something out and saying, this is them, this is that, I think
Their
they've
own
put
darn
themselves in a
fault.
real big hole. Exactly. It's absolutely their fault. So what I'd like to get your thoughts on, if you just move briefly over to disclosure with all that in mind, and you said that the truth can't stay buried forever. And I agree, truth comes out one way or another, it has a habit of doing that. But do you think these UAP, and I hate the phrase too, but I'll call it what it is for now, the UAP hearings are just another exercise in disinformation, just another way to dangle the carrot, just another way to drip feed a bit and then put it all away? Do you feel they're trying to control and take over the narrative now that people are kind of pushing and pushing and pushing for more information?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Look at every single government UFO study project, whether it's the Condon Committee, Blue Book, Robertson Panel, ARROW, the All
Yeah,
Domain
yeah,
Anomaly
yeah.
Reconnaissance.
Research.
That's
Yeah,
a mouthful. That one
it
made
is.
me laugh. Yeah, I think that we've now reached a point where if you don't say something, you're going to look like an idiot. You will not be credible. You're irrelevant. You have to tell some truth because at this point, if you don't, you've become useless. And
Yeah,
that's the point that they're actually at. So yeah, I think that's the driving force behind what's going on here. A vain attempt to get a hold of the narrative and steer it the direction they want. I think it's a little too late at this
Yeah.
point. I
yeah.
think, there's no good evidence
Going on
ETs
for
are
a
here
long
to take
time.
over or anything. They've been around
No,
forever. Let's not be ridiculous here.
no,
They're
it's
not going
true.
to harm us or take over. All the evidence is exactly the contrary.
Yeah.
There's my labs too, which really muddies the
Oh yeah,
waters.
yeah.
Military abductions.
My
Oh,
labs, and MK Ultra, and all those horrible things that they get into. It
yeah.
is
So
interesting, though, that Preston, that quite a number of people have reported having UFO experiences, and then go on later to report maybe poltergeist type things going on in their homes. I mean,
yeah,
this was noted that often that
I
when Spielberg was making his movie, he had to have a poltergeist scene in there, in a sense.
yeah. I think I finally figured that out. That one took me years and years.
Yeah,
I was talking to
yeah.
Irina Scott,
Oh
All
yes,
right, okay.
and she had an encounter, and she's like, afterwards, books were flying off the shelf. And I'm like, oh gosh.
yeah.
I remembered a case that I'd researched in Mount Rainier where a woman had an encounter and she went to work that day and her computer went down and she,
Mm,
electronically, she
Yeah.
blew out the copier and then the fax
Oh
machine.
no.
And then I interviewed this other guy, a Marine, who was a welder. and went to work and blew out this hugely expensive machine. He's like, you wouldn't believe the number of light bulbs I go through. It's your bioelectric field.
Right.
Contactees can't wear watches. When
Mm.
you have an ET visitation, your psychic abilities, your bioelectric field becomes magnified, perhaps,
Yeah.
escalated to
Yeah.
such a degree that that's what, a poltergeist is. It's kind of uncontrolled mediumship.
Mm.
It's, exteriorized telekinetic abilities. It's you who's doing this.
Mm.
So I think that's what's going on here,
Yeah.
because contactees will suddenly start having mediumship, seeing shadow people, having out-of-body
Yeah.
experiences,
Shadow people. That's right. That's also
all
been
these
referred
things.
to.
I mean, the shadow
Yeah.
people is interesting because a lot of the times those people will see shadow
Mm.
people and they'll experience like malfunctioning equipment before they actually realize they've had contact with extraterrestrials. It'll be things that they'll think
Yeah.
of, oh, I've got a haunted house. I mean, briefly, I spoke to a lady who was on a forum and she was very similar. She was talking about what she believed was a haunting. She was saying how she'd find things move around her house. She'd wake up in different rooms. She'd often have dirt on her feet. And the one thing that stood out to me is she said she had really strange dreams of an owl looking in at her through her bedroom window. And
Oh,
I kind
red
of
flag.
leapt on that exactly. And I said, look, I don't know if this could be paranormal, but have you considered that this could be alien encounters? And she completely shut down. She just would not contemplate that. She was happy to contemplate the haunting side. But as soon as I mentioned that, she went, no, it's not that. I don't want anything to do with that. So, yeah, I think it's fascinating, like you say, that there is a connection there and that people do think that they're experiencing hauntings when they're actually probably experiencing something else. I mean, do you find this a lot, Preston, in your research? I'm sure you do, because likewise, I've read your stuff for years, so I know you've got cases like this. But I mean, is it more prevalent than people think?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's sometimes hard to unpack, like you said.
Yeah.
A family from Illinois contacted me, and they were having ghost problems, and it was standard ghostly stuff, footsteps and lights going on and off, and doors opening and closing. And I'm like, okay, well, anything else going on? And they said, well, there's this object hanging over our house. I'm like,
Right.
what do you mean it's an object? Well, it's, I don't want to bring it up, but I think it's a UFO. I'm like, okay, what is going on here? Because, I
Yeah.
had that case with the guy in Canyon Country, which I mentioned earlier,
Mm.
UFO lands. He had a Bigfoot encounter the next day. He had a poltergeist outbreak following that.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Because
had
some
another case where
correlation. Mm.
these ladies had a demonic haunting. I mean, full on in an apartment in Van Nuys, California, and a very profound UFO sighting once they got rid of that darn ghost. So that
Yeah.
was kind of a reverse,
Yeah.
two-way street
Strange.
there.
Yeah.
There's a connection for
It's
sure.
definitely. Yeah.
It's
Of
still a
course,
little bit
I
hard to
believe they
unpack,
may
though.
have. I think that they may have even learnt of this back in the days of Blue Book, because I was told that Blue Book officers would ring up the press and say, look, we're going to see Mrs. Brown at this particular place today, and all the guys are there with the film and the cameras to film how good a job that the Blue Book officers were doing. They get out of the car and very posh looking, brown satchel, walking very efficiently to talk to Mrs. Brown. But halfway through her story, and this has happened a lot of times, like Mrs. Brown would say, "Oh, okay, well, I'm having some other things happen as well, and these strange things moving around in the house." And apparently, Blue Book officers said, "Look, we don't want any of that ghosty stuff. Just stick to the UFO facts, please, Mrs. Brown." And apparently, that happened quite a lot. So it was compartmentalized. So that people didn't think were things were maybe connected in some way.
Understandable. For in the early days of UFO research, investigators wouldn't touch humanoid reports.
Mm.
Didn't want to
Yeah,
hear about the humanoid report. And the crash retrieval suffered much worse. That whole area was absolutely ignored for decades. Now it's
yeah.
the forefront of research.
Well, yeah,
It's
they
got the
talk about it
greatest
a lot now.
potential, I think, to really, all bets are off. We know what these are because we have the Crafton bodies.
Yeah,
It's purely anecdotal evidence at this point. It's solely eyewitness testimony. Maybe a
yeah.
thousand or more, but gosh, we have the absolute
I
evidence and we
often,
just
I
can't get our
often
hands on
wonder,
it.
I often wonder, Preston. When the government says we have these and some are alive, I often think, how did it contain them? Because they quite clearly can demonstrate walking through physical walls when it comes to, contactee experiences and things like that. I often think, well, is that truth? Are we really being told the truth, about these
I don't
things?
think so.
I
Yeah.
don't. It's hard to wrap your head around that, isn't it?
I think probably we have some bodies. I don't know that they're being kept alive.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think that, like look at Roswell. Why didn't the ETs just come and scoop it up? Well, because we were crawling all over it like ants.
Hmm.
To do so at that point would have created even bigger sort of.
Probably. Yeah.
I think one thing to consider as well, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, both of you really, but I mean, I know a lot of reports they speak of strange boxes, essentially devices, and because these, if we think of aliens, we think that, and no doubt they are hugely more advanced than we are, but they're still fallible. You would imagine, everything and everybody is fallible. So I'm kind of thinking about, for sake of argument, if they have got a creature contained alive, and I don't think they have, but if they have, it's quite possible that without such devices, they're really next to useless. If those devices that they need, this advanced technology that they may need to walk through walls, open portals, blah blah
Mm.
blah. And it's same with the UFOs. I think it was Lazar who said, because people say, they scoff and say, well, they can fly in space, but they come to Earth and they crash. I think Lazar highlighted that the gravitational differences between traveling in space and traveling on the Earth or within the Earth are vastly different. And he was hinting that that's what's causing such crashes. So do you think they are
Mm.
fallible? They're not all powerful. I mean, they're certainly
Yeah,
advanced. Or do you think that, you think
I
that
think
we don't often consider that they are actually fallible and they make mistakes?
sure. I mean, they are people. Just to circle back a little bit, I do think that at some point the ETs were kept alive for a short amount of time, perhaps.
Hmm.
Because if you look into the reports, almost always they do pass away. But yeah, absolutely fallible. Again, our Earth's magnetic gravitational fields are incredibly unstable.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think if you look into the contactee reports, ETs tell people, well, this is how we navigate your planet. We basically ride these magnetic field lines.
Yeah.
And if you look into the science on this, they're wavering all over the place. So if one suddenly drops, well, that craft is going to come right down.
Yeah. True.
And if you've got thousands of these things flying around at any given time,
Yeah.
and they don't have to show themselves if they don't want to. We know this. They can cloak like
Oh
nobody's
yeah.
business.
Yeah, yeah. They've got
So,
some. I think maybe they have become technologically dependent, but then aren't we? To be honest with
Oh,
you,
yeah.
humans
yeah,
are becoming that
accidents
way.
happen to
Also.
everybody.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, just to circle back to UAP and disclosure, and I say disclosure, we all know that that's not a real thing, but I mean, why do you think they are hoarding such secrets? Not just the American government, but governments around the world. I'm sure there are governments that are working with the American government, or at least the portion that are dealing with this stuff. Why do you think they're holding on to it? I mean, there's loads of theories out there, isn't there? That the world will just go to ruin if we realize there are aliens, or that they're holding on to secrets so they can weaponize technology. What are your thoughts, and what have you been told by contactees, if you've been told anything about why the governments are wanting to keep such a secret?
Yeah. Oh, this is a very difficult subject to really understand because I don't think the way I think our governments, and I'll use that term loosely, secret government. It's the intelligence agencies, it's the
Yeah.
military industrial complex, the Pentagon, the highest level of the military. They are the ones, behind the cover up. We've tracked that pretty clearly. And I think there's multiple reasons behind it. One
Mm.
was initially, this was a policy that was adopted very early on, and they've essentially painted themselves into a corner
Mm.
because it's very hard to reverse policy when
Yeah.
you've been doing this for so long.
But
Ultimately, I think,
it does seem that it's global though, Preston. It looks like
yeah, for sure.
it's not just the US that have. I think other countries have these technologies now.
Cooperative.
Exactly. So is it a fact that we can't disclose things because we don't want to disclose to China and Russia and all the other countries? Maybe.
Yeah. It would show that it's all a complete farce. We're selling weapons to both sides.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's greed. I think it's power, it's control. Look at the military-industrial complex. Look at the energy industry. Look how much money they make off of
Yeah.
oil. Look at
Yeah.
the pharmaceutical industry,
Yes. Exactly.
They're all
UFOs
quite
and
entwined,
healing.
aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
ETs have technology to heal a wide variety of illnesses.
Yeah. I've
What
been
if
hearing.
we've gotten a hold of
Yeah.
some of that?
I've been hearing
They're
about these medibeds. There's a number of contactees that's talked about these special medibeds or medical
We
beds.
just don't think our governments are going to disclose because they are reverse engineering this stuff.
Mm.
They've got that to such a degree that I think that they have a very nefarious plan for the future. There's a lot of buzz about a false flag uh,
Oh yeah, for sure.
operation, and that's hard to verify. That's not my area of expertise. I'm following it as closely as I can because I'm worried about it. And yes, contactees have been told about this directly from the ETs that this is a plan. I've been told by contactees that no, the ETs are not associating with governments in any way at this point because they have chosen a pathway of, and I'll just say evil.
Well,
You know,
these people said that though, Preston, that people they've been working together.
yeah. Initially, there was back in the 50s, I think some really good reporting on that. But no, now, no, not reptilians running the government. I think that's disinformation. Uh, I come at this from a pretty skeptical angle in terms of what can you verify? What evidence do you have? What actual good reporting? Because, evidence in this field is few and far between, or at least there's a perception of that. It's not really true. The evidence is outstanding. Photographic, implant removals, radar returns, landing traces, angel hair. I mean,
Oh,
we
yeah.
could go on.
Angel hair, yes. There was a very interesting case where angel hair fell across a whole stadium of
Oh yeah.
people watching a
And that was
football match.
1954, which again, just circling back to what you were talking
Yeah,
about with CERN, is really,
exactly.
really interesting actually. That's when that
Yeah.
happened.
And it was analysed by
Mm,
specialists as well. They managed to actually, but what they said is they couldn't come into physical contact with it because it would
mm,
seemingly just dissolve away. So they had to be
yeah.
very careful about its collection. But it was fascinating because it literally dropped all over
Yeah.
the whole stadium.
Yeah, and that
But
was off the
Couple of
back of
schoolyard cases
UFOs.
of that too.
There are,
yeah,
yeah, we angel hair with kids picking that up. I mean, just I would like to ask you quickly before we kind of start to wrap this up. You mentioned about, like be wary of like fake alien invasions and things of that nature. What are your thoughts? And I won't name countries, but we all know who they are. The perceived enemies of the West. Are they in cahoots with the American intelligence agencies, or are they doing their own thing and trying to reverse their own stuff? Is this a race between the East and the West, for example, to reverse engineer this stuff, or are they working together above what we all see?
It's my opinion, and it's hard to really verify this. I think they're working together personally.
I think there's some
Um,
evidence to support they are in some
yeah.
things. Yeah.
From what I understand, the ETs aren't even here now.
Right, okay.
Dolly Saffron was the first to tell me this, and I'm starting to, because I'm in touch with a lot of contactees, and they're like, well, I haven't had a contact in 4 years. It's coming around 2022 or thereabouts. Direct contactee reports dropped dramatically. That drone wave? I think
Mm.
that was us. Wasn't a
Oh,
single report of
yeah.
anyone being taken on board or anything
No,
like that with
definitely.
every
Yeah.
other wave you
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I think they're working together. I think they know what's coming. I think if you look into DUMBs, deep underground military bases, the seed vaults,
Mm.
I, I
Mm.
think that they're aware that we're facing, a mass CME, coronal mass ejection, that will knock down the world's power grid and lead to
Mm.
intense
Didn't we have one?
chaos.
Didn't we have one in the 1800s that dropped
Oh
out?
yeah,
It
we
just
took
took out
everything out.
Telegram and
Yep.
everything or something.
I mean, and that you
1859.
see
Yep.
that caused damage. Then it was limited electrical appliances. If that
He was
happened
hardly anything
today,
then, wasn't there?
yeah,
Yeah.
it would take everything out. I think I saw a documentary on this, and it's pretty accurate. I think within days things would grind to a halt. You know what I mean? Because electricity is supplying everything from power, petrol, even. So it wouldn't take
Yeah.
long for things to grind to a halt if that happened. And as you say, there was a near miss, wasn't there, about 20 years ago, where there was a massive ejection, but it just kind of missed the planet. But that could have been very, very different if that had hit. So.
Mm.
You look at contactees, this is really interesting. They've gotten this message. A good number of them are moving off grid. They're collecting food and water. I would
Mhm.
recommend that
Oh
to
yeah.
people. You can buy rice, beans, and pasta enough for a couple of years. I would recommend that. It's cheap, $200-300 will get you enough food for a couple of years that will
Yeah.
keep.
So,
Do
yeah.
it. Make sure you have a water source. This is just common sense.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to be very
It could
comfortable, I
have.
think, that we can go to the grocery store. But
Our
remember what
history
happened in
shows it.
2020? You couldn't. You could
No,
not go.
we couldn't do anything. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? How humanity's painted ourselves into a corner. And there's some guy living up on top of some hill just giggling to himself, thinking, I don't depend on anybody but me. And it's just the way the system is, isn't it? It's just gone a bit. But you know what? It's even rumours of this because I know that they've come clean a little bit now about stratospheric spraying. They certainly have here in the UK anyway.
Yeah.
But there's rumours that they were doing this to filter out the sun. In fact, there was some serious talks about completely filtering out the sun as best it could for a duration of time, which I thought was preposterous. But there's some people are suggesting that this is basically to try and protect us from the seriousness of damages from these corona discharges should one happen. That this
It'll work.
ionosphere bounced it back, but
Yeah, it'll just go straight through.
I
No,
don't think it will work. Yeah.
Look up what's his name, Space Weather News, Ben Davidson. He's kind of the go-to guy on this, but there's a lot of good science being done on this right now. It's being covered up as well. Let's face it, there's a lot of cover-ups of anything like inventions of anything towards free energy or anti-gravity,
absolutely.
or even the electric car was quashed by the oil industry for a long time.
Yeah, that was being driven around back by Teslas, though. Literally, it's named after the guy. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tesla himself was an interesting chap. I mean, we're really approaching that 90-minute mark. So what I'm thinking is we'll have to wrap this up. But Preston, and I think Steve will second this. I'd love to have you back on because you mentioned there about astral projection, and I think we could do a real deep dive into astral projection because it is a intriguing subject.
Fascinating.
Absolutely, in its own right. So hopefully you'd like to come back on. But I mean, before we wrap this up, Preston, what have you got coming up? I mean, have you got, the word prolific really, kind of
In
for
writing,
yourself.
yeah.
So, what have you got coming up? More books, any TV work, any podcasts? The floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me on. I truly appreciate it. Yes, let's talk astral projection. I absolutely love that. Always got lots of projects going on. Currently, I'm working on a sequel to my book, Symmetry, A True UFO Adventure about Dolly Saffron, which, the first book was all about her adventures with ETs. Now we're going to dig into the science that the ETs taught her and some of
Interesting.
this kind of stuff about dimensions and, ancient history on Earth and just some really interesting subjects.
Did they ever tell her how many there were?
How many?
Dimensions.
Yeah, 12. Yep.
Okay. Just have heard
That makes a certain amount of sense, actually.
Yeah.
To be perfect.
Yeah, they're very firm on that, apparently.
Right. Interesting.
And they would know, wouldn't they? I don't know. But
Okay.
yeah, that's what I'm working on. Another astral projection book, another on UFOs. I'm going to touch on the paranormal again because, there is a connection there and it's super fascinating stuff. I've always got like 3 or 4 books I'm working on, and I go to the one I'm most excited about. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so I don't stop.
Have
Yeah.
you got any appearances or lectures anywhere, Preston, coming up?
Well, I do a weekly podcast with Dolly Saffron, The Light Gate, each Monday evening,
Oh, right. Okay.
8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. I have my own YouTube channel where I put out a new episode each Friday evening. In terms of lectures or, presentations, conventions, none at this point. I've got a few that might turn out, but, there's none that have been cemented in stone, so to speak,
Okay.
yet. But yeah, I usually do 1 or 2 a year. I've traveled so much lately. I did Shag Harbor last year.
Oh, did you?
Canada.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
getting to another country these days is not easy.
It is
Oh my
not. It's
God.
not as easy as it used to be, to
No,
be honest
totally.
with you.
But
Certainly
yeah,
a
I
few more
would.
concerns.
Given the opportunity, I probably would do it.
All right. Okay. Well, that's good.
Oh.
Busy.
Definitely. Preston, look, I'm sure Steve agrees. It's been absolutely fascinating speaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. And yeah, we would love to have you back on because astral projection deserves 90 minutes in its own right.
It really does. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, Preston, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Preston. Yeah, it was
And,
enjoyable.
Pleasure and an honor. Thank
no
you.
problem whatsoever. It's been our pleasure. And thank you guys for joining us. Make sure that you leave your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and make sure you check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com for further news, articles, and information. Until next time, goodbye and take care.